Hello everybody, I am Angry Birds. We're back today with a new pro deck review. We're looking at Gonzo's second French Armoured. If you want to have a look at this deck in more detail, learn a bit more about how to play it from the man who created it himself, then make sure you stay tuned. This series aims to bring you top tier 1v1 decks for you to use. So let's start off. The first thing I asked Gonzo was, what is your main game plan when you pick/play this deck, and how would you advise people to approach the deck? Gonzo emphasised the fact you've got to have a strong start and secure the important capture points, and then on top of that, defensive points in A phase to ensure that you can defend them later on into the game. You can see this in action in the game I cast previously, Gonzo versus US Prester John. I recommend going back, looking at that cast and watching how Gonzo uses this deck. If we cut to the 7-minute point, this is just before US Prester John surrendered. He's taken 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 flags from US Prester John at the start of this game, and he's really secured himself a massive foothold in this really key defensive position. It's on top of a hill. Usually the player on the left hand side of this screen, US Prester John, would have a hell of a lot of AT guns, infantry support guns in this ridgeline with the heavy forest just firing all the way down onto Gonzo's positions. But not only has he taken the flags here, he has got the units in to defend this position, 2 cannon 57 mils. And I think this is what Gonzo was talking about when he says that you have to have a strong start with this deck. You have to be aggressive. There is no room to leave anything on the table with this deck. It is a do or die deck. You have to push hard in A phase, otherwise you will get beaten in B and C phase. Let's dive in, have a look at some specific units, why Gonzo chose them and how we're going to use them. Okay, first thing, we're into the Recon tab, and I asked Gonzo, why he picks the M3A3 Sparhy instead of the AM M8 Sparhy. They're both the same price. Most people, I think, pick the M8. It's faster. I was interested in Gonzo's reasoning. So Gonzo felt the Recon M8 was too expensive at 40 points, which is interesting because they both cost the same. But I think it boils down to the fact that the M8 does come in the tank tab at 30 points, so you're paying an extra 10 points just for that Recon optics. Now most people will pick the M8 here and use it as they would an M8 in the tank tab. They will rush forwards with that M8 and the M8 will die. You're losing that 10 points Recon optics for no reason whatsoever. Gonzo highlights that he likes having the M3 as additional tank support, and I think what he means here is he actually uses the Recon optics to sit with his other tanks. He doesn't rush the M3A3 forward like he would an M8 and put it into a dangerous position. Onto the infantry section, and there isn't too much to say about this. I think it's pretty much a standard French infantry loadout. Gonzo did highlight that you could personalise this a bit more by removing the Nueve. He feels they're a decent elite medium range infantry, but they are in low numbers. You could swap them out for the Pioneers or the Voltigeur Mitre or a leader. But on that note, he definitely says that units you should definitely not remove: the Sapeurs and the Voltigeurs. The Sapeurs are incredibly good shock infantry. They've got a fantastic loadout, they have the TNT shells, and they have the M1 bazooka with 250 meter range. The Voltigeurs are your standard line infantry, and you definitely need the numbers of these in, so do not remove these from the deck. And one interesting thing to notice here, all of the infantry units come in half tracks, apart from the volunteers, which you cannot select a different transport for. I didn't ask Gonzo about this, but I think he's done that to protect his infantry units. The French, they do not get a lot of infantry, so you do not want to lose these guys in transports. I think that's why Gonzo takes them in the half tracks. Heading into the tank tab, again, this is a pretty standard French tank tab. Most of the Shermans here are 1-star, so that's something to bear in mind. I did ask Gonzo about his decision to kind of reverse the Recon choice and take the AM M8s here instead of the Chart M5A1. This time, he said that the M8 at 30 points was cheap enough to do the job that he wants it to do. This unit is in there to kill transports and support vehicles at the start, and at 30 points you're not losing something too heavy. At 40 points I think he feels that's too big a loss. The speed of the M8 allows it to do that job, whereas the Chart M5A1 at 60 km/h is not fast enough. You're going to hear me mention the Shermans time and time again here. Plenty of questions I asked for Gonzo, the answer was Shermans, and we all know that the Sherman's an incredible tank. It is one of the best tanks in Steel Division 2, certainly at short range, so you've got to use those Shermans well. I asked Gonzo what he felt the most overlooked unit was. He pointed out the M4A376. I mean, this is the tank that can kill the heavies for you, but it's not just about that. Gonzo says it's a fantastic medium tank. Sure, it can kill the heavies at long range, but at medium it's incredible. It has the same aim time as a Sherman, but with decent armor penetration. He says one of the best mediums in the game. Into the support tab, and we have the Flamers, a standard in almost any pro deck. These guys here, these are supposed to capture the ground for you early, duke it out with the enemy flamethrowers, and hopefully get you those early flaks. Followed up by the Mitre 50 cals. These guys are in the 4 GPA and they go just as fast as the Flamers, but you do not want to lose these guys at 40 points apiece. These are the guys you don't want to lose. You don't mind losing the odd Flamer. And then we come on to an interesting pick here, the Obusier M4. So I asked first of all, why does he take the M4 instead of the M8? And it's all about damage here. The M8 does not do enough damage for Gonzo for him to pick this unit. And then I asked, what about the M4A3? And this choice was all about the phase. You can only bring the M4A3 in B phase, whereas you've got two of the Obusier M4s in A phase. So Gonzo wants these M4s out early to support his units, take out AT guns at long range, Pack 40s, 57mm, something that can stop a Sherman push in its tracks. And so he needs the Obusier M4 in A phase in order for him to do that. Moving on to the anti-tank tab, and you'll notice Gonzo's taken all 3 cards of Cannon 57mm. These are the units that's going to defend the ground for you once you've taken it. Gonzo has also taken 1 card of M10 tank destroyers. It's important to compare this to the Sherman so you understand the unit. Don't fall into the trap of thinking the M10 tank destroyer is the same as the Sherman. Yes, it's got more armor penetration, and that's what you want to use the M10 tank destroyer for that armor penetration, but it's nowhere near as good at taking out infantry and supporting units like the M4 Sherman is. The M10 tank destroyer has only 1 50 cal, the Sherman has a 50 cal and 2 30 cals. The M10 tank destroyer also only has 10 HE shells. Don't overload your deck with M10 tank destroyers. Onto the anti-air tab, and it's Bofors. Do not remove these Bofors, they are fantastic anti-air guns. Things are up in the air a little bit around AA, fighter planes, bombers at the moment in the Fate of Finland patch. This may change in the future, so just be aware that we are on a bit of an unstable patch at the moment in terms of air balance. Artillery, wow, 9 mortar M21 half tracks. 3 in A phase and 6 in B phase. This stands out, and I asked Gonzo why he picks 9 mortar half tracks. So Gonzo said in the past he did have the A phase card of mortar half tracks and then a B phase card of Obusier M7s, but he says he doesn't really like heavy artillery in general, and he prefers bringing in the mortar half tracks so that he can quickly focus things that need to be focused, like anti-tank guns that are going to take out those Shermans. I think you could look to personalise this tab a bit more, take out that B phase card of mortar half tracks and consider some of the options. If we look at the mortar 60mm, this thing fires so quickly. You can get 6 of these in A phase at 2-star vet. That fires at a whopping 36 rounds a minute. The thing you've got to bear in mind about this unit though, it only has 1,800 meter range. I still think it could be a decent unit. You do also have the Obusier M7, like Gonzo said. It is a heavier artillery piece. If you like that playstyle, you could bring this in B phase. There are some off-map options here. I would pick the M4A2 over the Piper L4 because the M4A2 has 155mm off-map, whereas the Piper L4 only has 105mm off-map. Into the air tab, and we have the DB7B smoke plane. A lot of people consider this somewhat of a meme plane, but clearly Gonzo loves it, and I actually think the same. I think it's a really useful plane. I asked him what's the main use for that DB7B smoke plane. Gonzo says it is to make artificial cover. He says a big problem with 2E Blindee is you lack long range answers to heavy tanks, and the map design on ST2 doesn't let you close in a lot of the times. Remember, in Normandy you had those hedgerows to hide behind. You don't have that in Steel Division 2. But he says with this DB7B smoke plane you can shut down the line of sight of heavy tanks, making enough cover to close in with M4s or AT teams. Gonzo also takes the P38J. I didn't ask him about this, but compared to the Spitfire, you could argue there is a possible choice between the two here. I think the heavier fighter at this time on the current patch in Fate of Finland is probably the best option. And finally we have the DB73 Bomber. It has 8 110kg HE bombs. Comparing that to the P38J, you might argue the P38J is the better choice at 2 450kg bombs, but I think the speed and the resilience really helps the DB73 shine. It is a fast bomber at 545km per hour, and it has very good resilience. Especially after the AA changes, it's going to be really hard to shoot down that DB73. And that thing is only 105 points compared to the 155 point P38J. You could argue that P38J is slightly overpriced at the moment. Okay, we've looked at specific units. Let's look at the deck as a whole. I asked Gonzo, what maps do you think this division plays best on and what it doesn't play very well on? Surprisingly, Gonzo said river maps. I wasn't expecting that. But he points out it's due to the medium ranges, and that's perfect for the division. It's got M4s, it's got infantry with semi-auto rifles. The speed of the M8s also help take bridges early on in those maps. He says long range maps are obviously a problem. This deck does suffer from having a lack of long range anti-tank capability. You do not want to duke it out on Slutsk. He also says that close maps are situational. It depends on what division the enemy is taking. Normally you might think a map like Zell would be a good choice for this deck, but like we saw Gonzo versus Lolly, Lolly took Kuruk and managed to beat Gonzo on that map, so it really does depend on the person you're facing in terms of close range maps. There are other divisions out there now like Armia Krahawa, like Rima Rapana that excel on those very close range engagements. So I asked specific incomes, does this play best against certain incomes? Gonzo says obviously he plays it on Vanguard, and it actually works well versus other Vanguard decks. Flatline can counter it since you only have 20 points of advantage with them in A as a Vanguard deck, and it's also situational versus balanced. If the other player does make a good defense in A phase, it can really counter you because you lose that B and C phase income and you have a lack of infantry. You really have to push hard in A phase with this deck. I asked Gonzo if he feels there's a unit he has to perform well with to win this deck. He pointed out the Shermans are there for infantry support and the 57mm are there to protect the Shermans against other tanks. You have to use those units in combination very well. I asked how he would counter this deck. He said have a defensive start, give up defensive positions near the 50% line, bring in counters to the M8 at the start and then the M4s later on. Be defensive in any A and B phase and you can win this in C phase. Finally, I asked Gonzo how hard he thinks it is to play this deck. Gonzo said it depends. The M8 rush can work at all levels, but he said that if that fails and the game lasts longer, it becomes harder and harder for new players if they don't know how to deal with heavies at medium and close range. I think I agree with him here. Definitely as a beginner, you can play this game and stomp people in phase A. That's not out of the question. But if you come up against a really experienced player that knows how to defend well in the early game, this can be a really tough game to win with. It's all or nothing in A phase, and then if you don't get the points you need, then you really have to know how to play well with the deck to grind out that victory. So finally, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Strengths, they're supers, they're great infantry, they have the satchel charge, they have the M1 bazooka. You've got the Shermans, fantastic infantry support, the best close quarters tank in the game. You've got the M8s, a great vehicle to rush forward with, along with those flamers. The Cannon 57mm, great AT gun at short and medium ranges. The Bofors, a good anti-air unit. This deck has strong units if you use them well. Weaknesses, it does lack that long range anti-tank capability. And even the short range, you know, big heavies like the King Tiger, it's going to be hard to take them out. Opportunities, this deck is laden with cheap units. There's only 2 units that cost over 100 points, the P-38J and the DB-73 bomber. That allows you to get incredible firepower onto the battlefield early and really push hard for the victory. Threats, it's that income. If you do not push hard in A phase, you get to B and C phase, you are really going to start to struggle if you haven't secured the right positions early on. Also, don't forget your infantry. You don't get a lot of these, 77 in total. It's not enough to grind out the game, so you have to finish it early. I think another big threat to this deck is those German pack guns. If you don't get a good handle on destroying those pack guns, they can really tear apart your Shermans. Okay, that's it guys. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you take away the deck, start using it. Let me know down in the comments below how you get on with that. Also hit that like button if you like this video. I hope to bring more of these pro deck reviews to you. Drop down in the comments how you think I could do this more effectively. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe for more Steel Division 2 content. Also check out the links in my description to my Twitch. Come and watch me play Steel Division 2 live. Thanks very much for watching. I am Angry Birds. I will see you next time.